And very good. So, again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us with Microsoft and Open. We're going to have Greg kick us off here for about the first 10, 15 minutes or so. And then Alan from Open Systems is going to present the bulk of the content today. Feel free to use the chat. I'll be monitoring. And then there'll be a couple stopping points so we can address any questions. All right. So with that, Greg, all yours.
Perfect. Thank you, David. So just by way of introduction, my name is Greg Wardis. I'm a digital security specialist here at Microsoft. I support the Enterprise South customers along with both Mercedes Bernal and David Driggers. I spent the last 15 years of my career in technology. I've been working with the 365 platform since its inception, all the way back to when it was called BPOS, or Business Productivity Online Suite. So that's just a quick snapshot of your digital security team. So let's shift our focus now over to you, the attendees. Many of you, if not all of you, are in a security role, or at least working very closely with your security team. Those titles and that responsibility, that alone tells us that you're all very busy. We just wanted to pause here for a second and say, thank you for giving us some of your time. We don't take it for granted that we're on your calendar for about an hour today. So again, we just wanted to say thank you. Our goal obviously is here to provide as much value as we can today. So in an effort to do that, we're really hoping that this can be as interactive as possible. So please drop any questions that you have into the chat. We've got folks from both Open Systems and from Microsoft monitoring the chat. So any and all questions will get an answer. So in an effort to make this as interactive as possible, I want to start by asking a couple of very simple, high level, but what I would deem as very important questions. And the first one is, what brought you here today? But what are you hoping to gain from this hour? On the call, we've got a wide variety of different titles from security professionals that range from CISO to DevOps managers to security engineers. And the day-to-day of each of those titles is obviously going to produce a different answer. And we want to make sure that we're addressing, every aspect of security today, from strategic planning to the boots on the ground. And that brings me to our second question. What do you as the attendee, no matter your title, what do you deem as the most concerning security obstacle for the year ahead? Now, I've got a couple of examples as far as possible answers. There's no wrong answer. We're truly just trying to determine what is important to the folks that are in attendance today. So if you would, please drop those into the chat. So as those answers are being entered into the chat, take a quick stroll with me down memory lane to the 2005 timeframe. In 2005, there were about 50 known threat types that didn't quite yet have global attention. Security in that time frame was essentially deploying a firewall, maybe fine-tuning some of the rules. Really, it was just implementing a real good block and tackle approach. And it yielded fantastic results for those 50 threat types. But as we fast forward to the present day, we're now all faced with over 1 million threat types. And as you can see here, simple math puts it at about 43,000 new attack types every single year. And the way that we've evolved and attacked this evolving timeline, accelerated timeline, and the way we address the accelerated timeline has also evolved. We're starting to implement a much larger number of tools. The need for resources is starting to grow. The need for specialized skills within those resources is starting to grow. And when we think about people's cloud journeys, the specialized skill sets is certainly relevant there. And then the data that's being collected from these various tools, that is certainly growing as well. So with a timeline that's as basic as this one is, it's still glaringly obvious that anybody that's in security, no matter your title, your role isn't getting any easier. Security professionals today are now tasked with performing at the highest levels with the best success rates because we in security, we can't afford to have an off day. But sadly, this is all happening kind of in tandem with so many IT and security budgets that are starting to shrink. And to top it all off, these attacks have evolved over time and now attack is from every corner of the globe and they're disguising themselves in different manners every day. So just to highlight the fact that these threats truly do have global attention. In 2018, the World Economic Forum, for the very first time, they put cyber attacks in the same quadrant as natural disasters. And then just in the last 5 years, we've seen things like IoT and OT explode onto the scene with billions of devices that have joined our various networks. And then, of course, we all experienced a global pandemic. Our workforce kind of experienced a major overhaul on how we view the workforce to where now a remote workforce is truly becoming the norm. And I say that as I sit here in my office today in Atlanta. And then just 2 weeks ago, the World Economic Forum again included cyber insecurity into their top 10 lists. So, with all these tools at our disposal and so many organizations that adopted a best of breed approach, why aren't we seeing these attacks be less effective? Well, I think the quick, easy answer is these point products don't easily talk to one another, and they certainly don't share their kind of siloed threat intelligence that each of them is creating. And this is where Microsoft is in a very unique position to do just that. We own and operate the world's largest threat library. We're analyzing a massive, massive amount of threat signals on a daily basis. We leverage things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. We're gathering data from multiple products and multiple services, which actually spans all the way from Azure all the way down to even Xbox. That data then reports to and updates the entire landscape. And just to put our threat library into more of a kind of a tangible example, Google receives about 8 to 8.5 billion unique searches on a daily basis, while Microsoft has analyzed over 65 trillion threat signals every day. I mean, it's just a massive number. So, keeping that accelerated timeline in mind, over the last 5 years, Microsoft has invested billions into security. That's being done through things like integration, updates, product enhancements, talented engineers, detection and response team. You may know that as the DART team, some of our acquisitions, and our security partners. Microsoft has adapted and evolved along with that accelerated timeline. But we're no longer just a software company that offers security on the side. We've truly evolved into a security company. Now, it'd be one thing if it was just me telling you all this as a Microsoft employee, but it's also highly respected third-party organizations that are touting Microsoft security. And in this one example here, we've got 8 different categories in Forrester where Microsoft is at or near the top in all 8. But aside from just Forrester, you have organizations like Gartner, the IDC, the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. They're all vetting Microsoft as a top tier security provider. But more importantly than just accolades from those logos you see, you, the Microsoft customer, have entrusted us with your security. And it's clearly resonating because just last week, we announced that we now protect over 860,000 customers. That is more than double than from just 2021. That's less than 2 years ago. Our $20 billion investment into security, that is Microsoft's commitment to continuous improvement, all of which 20 billion going into security. And that investment, it dwarfs all the other providers that are in this space. And speaking of other providers, I probably should have had a warning before this next slide. It's my final slide before I hand it over, but it's busy, right? So clearly a busy slide. If you haven't seen this infographic before, This represents some of the security providers that are available. This is a very crowded space with tons of competition. But if you think back to the previous slide, our bake-offs continue to prove that our technology, we've earned those accolades from folks like Gartner and Forrester and the like. So one final question before I turn it over to Open Systems. The slide we're looking at, I'm going to call this a placemat. Imagine your most trusted consultant hands you a laminated version of this placemat with a red Sharpie marker, and they ask, please circle every technology that you've got implemented inside your organization. Your placemat may start to look something similar to this. Now, if you're a smaller organization, maybe the number of circles is a couple fewer. If you're a much larger enterprise, maybe you've got a lot more circles on your placemat. But the point here is each one of these circles now represents its own implementation, its own team or experts, its own maintenance, its own life cycle, its own data output. And the one that I think really kind of speaks volumes is each one of these circles also represents possible exposure. Because when we're talking about security, you can never ignore the human element. And this is where misconfigurations come into play. And then kind of where this slide is really building to is that each one of these circles also represents integration. And each of these that are represented here, we know that integrations don't come without time and they don't come without a cost. And this is what this is what sets Microsoft apart from this very saturated security space. That's our ability to leverage our massive threat intelligence, which then in return opens up security-focused options to either integrate a little bit deeper or consolidate. And finally, we're able to effectively do this with utilizing the largest feather in Microsoft's cap, and that's our security-minded partners such as Open Systems. And with that, I will turn it over to Alan from Open Systems. I'm going to stop my share and let him start his share screen.
Greg, thank you. Just want to make sure, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. I just really want to say thank you on behalf of Open Systems to Greg, David, Mercedes, and the larger Microsoft team for inviting us on and for everyone to spend their time here with us. I also want to thank my own Open Systems team for helping to support this initiative and the time that we spent here to make sure that it's valuable as possible. And I hope it's very valuable for everyone here today. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
It
Looks good.
Great. So little bit about me. I've spent the last 10 years in security. And even before I got into the security space, you know, I was what you would call a little bit of an amateur, old school script kiddie. Some of you on this call may know about the good old days of AOL hell and the AOL private rooms and even AOL hacking. Some of the best white hat hackers kind of came out of these days. Some black hat hackers also came out as well. But it sort of shows that, like, an industry trend that, you know, it doesn't take a lot of skill to go out there and do something. We were doing it back in the day, right? Now this is happening at scale. I have a young son at home, and I've lived in some great cities, Chicago, New York, and Miami. And I was a part of the problem. I sold legacy MSSP best of breed models. And so I feel like I know some of the real pain, because I knew the pain as an MSSP provider of the things that we struggled with to support organizations in their security initiatives. Because really, at the end of the day, complexity is the enemy of intelligent security. There's a bunch of studies that go out, and you've probably seen a lot of these. I mean, organizations are struggling with the amount of security products, how many vendors they have to manage those security products, which is in itself a lift. The shortage, we all know about the shortage, right? It's thrown at us every single day. One that's interesting that I thought was this study that was done by a research institute that said organizations spend about $1.37 million on erroneous malware alerts, right? Stuff that doesn't matter, right? Because you're trying to piece it all together. And that's what organizations are faced with. Some of this is going to be a repeat of what Greg was saying, but it's an industry thing and it's known, right? Not even Microsoft. Microsoft's not the only one that's thinking about this. This is a good quote from who many of you know, from Pat Gelsinger. He said this at VMware at RSA back in 2020. And he said, customers aren't concerned that they don't have the right tools. Tools galore, right? They're looking for partners to help simplify the solution. And if you're not a platform, you're not doing management and security, you're part of the problem. You're not a part of the solution. Interestingly enough, our CEO, Jeff Hayden, and our Chief Product Officer, Tom Korn, were reporting directly to Pat Gelsinger at this time. During this period at VMware, they had acquired Carbon Black. And the goal was, how do you embed security into the install base of your customers? How can you make security embedded into the way you do business generally every single day? And as they were doing this, they were looking across the aisle and they saw what Microsoft was doing. And they said, well, there is no single technology firm in the world that has the install base, that has the cloud workloads, that has the endpoint, the identity layer, the operating systems. And if they can embed security into this, they can be the platform. So Jeff Hayden, Tom Korn came over to Open Systems to be one of those partners that can help simplify this solution and operationalize it. And it's not just tech vendors that are talking about this. This was the former head of the FBI. He said this way back in 2019 at the Gartner event. He said, look, technology isn't the answer to the challenge. Technology is the reason that we're here today. So you're hearing similar stories, right? You heard it from Greg. I'm sharing you another slide. Every single attack trend, attack surface has driven a new product, a new category. Back in the day, I actually thought about building an endpoint solution with a very senior developer who was at a PADSS. If anyone knows what that is, they secure the applications for PCI. And we said, look, we'll make a simple protocol. We'll go up to VirusTotal. We'll sell it to small businesses. How many products in this category are just chasing revenue and aren't thinking holistically about security? That's the biggest thing. We need to think holistically and we need to operationalize this. So there's a big wave that's brewing. This is a significant moment in time where we're at an inflection point as an industry, right? As customers, as vendors, as technology providers, and service providers. This is rare. This does not happen very often. And we have a moment in time where we can simplify the complexity. We can have security partners who actually overperform. I don't think I've heard a single customer or prospect that said, wow, man, my security partner is absolutely spectacular. And we can reduce the operational pain and really tie into the business outcomes that we're looking to achieve. Every organization is different. Every organization has operational challenges when it comes to security. And we're at a point now where the technology and the services can catch up so that we are solving these things. So I'm going to pivot a little bit now to MDR and why MDR has been a key component to this big wave. Now, first, we shifted from MSSPs. If you remember what I talked about before, I was selling some of this. We used to say, what kind of tools do you have? What kind of endpoint technology do you have? What kind of firewalls? What kind of SIM? We didn't really care. We said, oh yeah, we'll manage it. Well, jack of all trades, master of none. We really struggled to try to build true automation, true response, and we struggled to understand what was critical within customers' environments. We had the same issues a customer would have trying to manage multiple different point solutions. We just were a master services. So MDRs came along, they started to streamline some of this, and they did a great job. But MDR needed to evolve, right? They took the step forward from what an MSSP of fulfilling the value promise, but they still haven't caught that big wave. Well, why is that? So we'll talk a little bit about the evolution of MDR, of where it came from and where it's going. So most of you know this, right? The first wave was endpoint visibility. Look, we were trying to protect the largest attack surface on the environment, and it helped. It was a big help to organizations. And then it started to evolve, right? So not only did we have sort of AV endpoint technology, but it got into heuristic learning. If it looks and it smells like a piece of malware, let's block it, right? We can start, even if we haven't seen the signature, we can start blocking these things. And then we started looking into what's happening on the network, what's happening on the identity layer. This brought such a broader investigative context to really sophisticated campaigns that were trying to exploit multiple attack vectors, right? And we pulled in that telemetry through SIMs. We were able to build a map of what was happening on our environment. Well, the next generation MDR is looking to be a little bit less tools focused, and is starting to drive more into a missions focus. So not only are we going to have the XDR visibility, the advanced detection, but we'll be able to understand what kind of impact will this indication of compromise have on my environment. Is this a vulnerability on an Avaya phone system that's sitting in some sales office that's completely isolated from my network? Or is this vulnerability an indication of compromise, a server that has a service that's critical to our ERP application? What's the blast radius of this? And if I shut it down and I isolate that host, what kind of business impact is that going to have on us as an organization? We need to start understanding those things. And not only that, we need to continue to have risk mitigation, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we need to understand exactly what are the things that we need to be doing to continue to reduce our attack surface. I always say MDR should have had another letter in the acronym. It should be MPDR, right? Manage Prevention, Detection, and Response. And then most important, sometimes overlooked, we need to have cross-functional collaboration. It's not just security who is in this game. It's IT. It's executive leaders. If you've ever been in a state of breach, hopefully you haven't, you're getting asked a lot of questions. How are you facilitating and disseminating that information and doing it efficiently with your IT teams and with your executives? We need to have a platform that facilitates this. So, why has MDR failed the customers? We've talked about the evolution, but they did a good job. Why haven't they done the next level? Well, they were too slow in making decisions. They were too reactive. We talk about, companies say all the time, we do the big R. Well, that's great. You could do a lot of response, but if you're just chasing fires, you're not really getting ahead of the threats. And they're too inefficient. You heard me talk about all the different tools, right? Whether it's an organization or a managed service, it was too many tools and too little staff. So the next scenario is, how do we be fast with our decision-making process? Build on top of automation, AI, machine learning. Yes, they're buzzwords, but to leverage true capabilities and the fast market that's evolving frequently to be able to make the most use of your SOC analyst is going to be critical. How do you be proactive? How do you continue to reduce your threat surface and reduce the noise on your environment? And how can you be efficient? The way we see it is, how do you put the Microsoft investment to work for you? You may have bought or evaluating E5. You probably have almost every single tool that you need to secure your environment at a much more efficient pace. So how does MDR need to evolve, right? We talked about being fast. These are some of the components that we need to do in order to be fast. How do we be proactive, right? We need to reduce noise. We have to get ahead of this problem. And how do we be efficient? Well, we can start retiring legacy controls. We can simplify our stack, right? These are things that are going to dramatically reduce burden from your organizations and be able to reduce cost. Greg talked about the headwinds that we face, right? Those are critical. And everyone, for the last 15 years, people would say, do more with less. Well, we're really in a marketplace where you have to show and build the business case to show that you're reducing costs, but still doing more with the money that you have. So we feel there's a new operational model for MDR, right? Built with automation, collaboration, localization, specialization, and prevention. And I'm going to show you how we do that from our visibility and our version as we look at a simplified view of your environment. So end of the day, your operations is to support users, going through infrastructure, getting into your applications. That's your environment, right? And through that, you have a security control plane. Whether that's your SIM, your endpoint, all the tools that both Greg and myself have shown, you probably have a smattering of some of them. You're trying to piece together a control plane. And at the end of the day, as a security organization, it's not just about response. You have missions. You are trying to stop attacks before they happen. You're trying to stop a malware infection. You don't want ransomware. And you're doing that by trying to harden your posture, mitigate phishing attempts, right? Reduce the amount of vulnerabilities on your environment. Those are the missions that you have. It's not to deploy an endpoint technology. At the end of the day, you're deploying an endpoint technology to try to solve these security missions. And the headwind that we're faced with in solving those security missions are stuff that you have all heard about before. Talent shortages, budget reductions, siloed teams, lack of environmental context. And on the control plane, we have too many tools. They're hard to tune, they're hard to optimize, they're hard to piece together and stitch together with APIs and shipping logs, right? And then we got to hire a bunch of people to be able to be experts at all those tools. Well, that's difficult to do. And it's difficult for an organization to adapt as things change within the marketplace. So those are the things that we're faced with. So at Open Systems, this is how we view it. This is how we perform our MDR service and how we're trying to be a next generation MDR provider. You have your operations and we simplify the control plane. And we do that through Microsoft. Now, what's important here is this control plane, yes, it's Microsoft, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't cover all providers, right? We extend this control plane into AWS, GCP, we extend it into the applications. We extend it into the different components that make your environment unique, but still allows us to simplify and consolidate how we're looking at the story. And then we leverage mission control to build in the detection response, the assessment and prevention to actually support the missions that we talked about. So I have a quick story. It's a customer story of an organization. It's a software company. The software company builds applications. They do managed applications. And as you can imagine, they're in every single cloud provider. And they came to us and they said, look, we bought E5. We're into the Microsoft story. But the challenge is that we're in AWS and GCP. How are we going to extend this layer up into, in our security, up into these other cloud providers? Well, through our dedicated team of consultants, as well as our managed services on the MDR side, we're able to extend Azure Arc into these different cloud providers, pull in the proper telemetry, and really create a holistic security viewpoint across all of their applications, no matter where their workloads were. They've been quite happy. So the next generation of MDR is going to operationalize security. We're going to move from detection, and we're going to get into far more response. We're not just going to look at threats on the environment, right? We're going to understand the actual risk. as it exists. As mentioned, you have an IOC. What does that mean to the risk to your organization? Not just from a threat standpoint, but what happens if I shut it down? What does that mean from the blast radius? We're going to move towards collaboration from a security-based organization to a full-blown IT and executive organization that can operate with speed and scale. And we're going to take the very complex challenge of security, and we're going to simplify it. Does this mean that this challenge of security is a simple challenge? It is not. It is still a complex challenge. But the more that we can simplify this, the more we can begin to solve the complex challenge of security. So this is the most simple slide that you're going to see all day. But this is what we do. We take your environment, we take your investment into the Microsoft security stack, we operationalize this, we get it installed, we configure it, we tune it, and we deploy our MDR Plus, the next generation of MDR, on top of your environment. So there's no third-party data risk. You're taking advantage of maybe a licensing model that you already have in place or you're considering, and we're able to operationalize it for you at scale. Now, I have a couple more slides, but I do want to pause right now for questions and have us provide any answers.
Alan, there's one in the chat that is specifically to open systems and kind of aimed at threat hunting. What kind of threat hunting expertise do you have? And when at you, I'm assuming it's open systems. And how is that shared to your customer base?
That's a great question, and thank you, Victoria, for asking that. So I have a couple people on the call. I'm going to start the answer, and if Matt Berg or some other folks want to jump in, feel free to come off of mute. Open Systems has dedicated threat hunters. So the way that we build out our model is, and I probably have a slide for it, but we build out our model to ensure that if there's a 0 day, right, we want to be able to understand how many of our customers are have a potential vulnerability. So the first thing that we do is we actually write a script and we run a query across all of our customers, and we do this with automation. So part of the threat hunting component is making sure that we have an automated version of this to make sure that we're picking up on any O days, any types of vulnerabilities that exist on the environment. If we pick up a signal that says our customers do have one of these vulnerabilities for an O day, we will jump in with a dedicated threat hunting team to go and attack this and provide recommendations to understand exactly what needs to happen from the organization. Sometimes we can take action on that. But as we all know, some organizations, we can't necessarily do, nor would you want us to do some of the mitigation on these machines. We will give you the recommendations of exactly what you need to do to mitigate that risk. So that's on an O day. We also do dedicated threat hunting just in general. So each customer that comes on with Open Systems, you're going to get a dedicated staff of SOC analysts who are assigned to just your account. You obviously have 24/7 management and security, follow the sun operations model, but we want to make sure that you also have a team that knows your environment. And so this team, combined with the threat hunting team, says, hey, these are the things that we're looking for ABC Corporation, right? They're concerned about, access to Salesforce, or they're concerned, about multiple AD tenants, right? That have really large AD sprawl. You can we're going to go do hunting anyways, and we spend, our threat hunters spend time constantly threat hunting on the environment, but we're also we want to focus it, right? And sometimes that could be our opinion, but I'd say most of the time we want to get that opinion from the customers of here's some of the things that I'm worried about. I hope that answers your question. And if anyone else has anything to add, feel free to jump in.
Hey, Alan, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. This is Matt Berg. Just to add on to that, just really quick, when we start talking about expertise in the team, we have a completely full team that is doing threat hunting, right? So it is part of our security operations center. Alan did a good job of kind of how that is integrated in our operations. But when we start talking about expertise, it is a full dedicated team that is just doing threat hunting, as well as keeping tabs on geopolitical actions that are happening, anything that is going on from the threat landscape and how that affects, our customer base. And those actions are really what drives the threat hunts that take place, right? So when we start talking about expertise, that's really how far we're going. Day to day, those folks are dedicated at learning what's going on, risk-wise across the globe and how that can affect our customer base, and then exploring that.
I'm going to add a little something else to this. Going back to what Greg said earlier, Microsoft has more signal on threats than any organization in the world. And so Open Systems built a model which this may seem very logical and easy, but I can assure you that it was not easy to do. But Open Systems built a model called Rapid Cover, where we are able to take the latest, to the second threat alerts and threat intel from Microsoft and build it into our SOC. So that it is from the day that they release it, Open Systems has access to it. And Open Systems is operationalizing it at scale for all of our customers. This was done through a deep partnership that we have with Microsoft. We couldn't have done it without them, but it is a key component of our operations model and our MDR service. Very good question. Are there any other questions? And maybe there's questions about the technology stack itself, right? Microsoft's, I get questions all the time about Defender for Cloud and Defender for Server and how, if there's any questions, maybe just on the tech or operation model, whatever it is, we have a good team here to answer those.
Alan, we got another one here. How do you work together with a client during a security incident?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hopefully you're never in a state of breach, but in security, we always say when, not if. You have to be prepared for when it's going to happen. You have to do tabletop exercises. You have to assume that it's going to happen, because if you don't assume it's going to happen, then you're not going to be prepared for when the time does happen. So on that note, we will run through, we don't do tabletop exercises, but we're your MDR provider. We'll go through tabletop exercises with you and the organization that you work with. We can do a whole litany of response capabilities. When we're in a state of breach, we're all hands on deck, right? We're there to isolate hosts, to understand exactly what's happening in the environment, and we're there to take action. But we are not an incident response provider. If you need forensics, if you need people to come parachute in on the ground, we have partners that we work closely with. But the way we view it at Open Systems is being the incident response provider for a platform that you're supporting is kind of like grading your own homework. Like, you want an incident response provider that is coming in with a different viewpoint of what's happening on the environment. And of course, we're going to work and collaborate with them. But it's really key that you have an IR provider, that we do tabletop exercises, et cetera. We also build out very robust escalation matrices that tie back to the asset criticality to ensure that, like I mentioned before, is this an Avaya phone system or is this a critical asset? Well, critical assets have a different tier of escalation matrix. That if we do get in a position where we have a severe threat, we run through a different escalation matrix to assign that to really the risk on the environment. As I mentioned before, it's all about understanding the risk when things happen. I hope that answers the questions. Mercedes, you asked the question, when you say OSI, do you mean open systems?
Yeah, that's what that was regarding to. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, there's an extra letter in there. So I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that's a great question, Mercedes. So open systems, and I actually have a slide for this. We do what's called threat protection workshops here. I should probably maybe just jump over to that slide. So how do we know if it's a good fit for a customer? So we do really comprehensive threat protection workshops where we're reviewing, and by the way, these are funded by Microsoft. So if you do have interest in something like this, please reach out to your extended Microsoft team. They can see if your organization is approved to have a threat protection workshop, and then Open Systems can come in and do this threat protection workshop. But basically the workshop highlights, you can read it here, right? What are your security goals? Like understanding the tools that you have. What's the cost benefit analysis? Almost every single customer that we work with goes through some form of a business case development and a cost benefit analysis. Like you got to understand, where am I saving money? Maybe there's a meter that goes up a little bit over here, but I can pull down, significant costs from another technology over here. We can help you with that. We can help evaluate, your current deployment. Maybe you have zero deployment, or maybe you've already dabbled in a lot of the Microsoft security. We can check your configs, check, the architecture of how you've rolled this out. We can shoulder surf with you and say, hey, here's the best practices of how you deploy this technology, and your team's there the entire way learning this, right? At the end of the day, we want to enable the organizations to be a partner in this MDR platform, right? We don't want to be just this black box outsourced. And by the way, Microsoft has architected a solution that allows for that in a way that no one else has. But we want to enable your team so that they become experts in the technology, so that there's no single point of failure. We go through plenty of demos, and really the whole thing is pretty comprehensive, but it's not overly it's not a massive level of effort, but it's very, very comprehensive. That's a great question, Mercedes. Thank you.
And Alan, I've heard over the last couple of weeks from a different number of internal presentations that security is truly a team sport. And just to say thank you to Open Systems seems like an understatement. So we appreciate the partnership. We appreciate the hard work that goes into keeping the bad actors out of play and really off the plates of your customers and our customers. And I did just want to highlight the fact that these workshops bring so much value of, grading your current infrastructure and your current security posture to where it just adds so much more value than just getting that, scorecard. It can actually map out what needs to be done in what order in an area that, is comfortable for everybody involved. But it is in fact a team sport to where it's both Open Systems, Microsoft, and the customer attacking these lists that get created together.
You're spot on, Greg. We always say the bad actors are constantly working in teams and leveraging each other's knowledge, right? The defense side needs to start doing the same thing. We need to behave in that same way. We need to have that hive mind in order to secure the environments against the adversaries that are building billion-dollar businesses on this. And, you know, Greg, I'll share this one thing. As organizations do look to, you know, go into this next wave of security, right? There's a couple of things that you're going to have to do, whether you work with a partner or you try to do it yourself or you try to piece it together. You got to have automation. You got to build collaboration, as we just talked. You got to understand what your local environment is and prioritize incidents because your response hinges on that. You got to have specialization. In our case, it's the Microsoft security stack, but you got to have those experts in-house, and you got to rely upon prevention. We have to shrink the attack surface. It's not enough to just say you're responding. We need to do more than that. And really, the marketplace deserves more than that. So I just want to say thank you so much, again, to everyone who joined us today. Open Systems was honored to be the Security Partner of the Year from Microsoft. We have accolades, one of the founding members of the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, or MISA. We have, you know, all the accolades, and we have the use cases and stories from customers to prove it. So if you are interested in more, we really look forward to having a dialogue.